Hey everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at the ingress of Mars into the sign of Pisces. So Mars is now getting in on the action with Venus and Jupiter and Neptune. Jupiter and Neptune, of course, having just conjoined this week. So it'll be interesting today to take a look at what it might mean that Mars is now entering the mix and give us some insight about that, along with some of the key transits. Mars is going to eventually conjoin Neptune. The change of Mars means something for other planets as well. When, for example, the sun is about to square Pluto and the sun is in Mars's sign, and Mars changes signs, that means that the mood and feel of that sun Pluto transit is going to be different. And the same thing goes for an eclipse in the month of May. When we have an eclipse in Scorpio, Mars's sign, well, Mars is culminating at the last degrees, challenging degrees of the sign of Pisces. That's going to change the mood and feeling. So we're going to take a look at some of those things today, and we'll get into a good look, good kind of a good preview of Mars in the sign of Pisces. So before I get into it, I want to remind everybody that my new course, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, starts on June 5th. This is a one-year program in Hellenistic astrology. New courses start in June and November every year. We've had thousands of people come through the program now. It is a really good, solid, deep dive into ancient Hellenistic astrology. If you want to learn more about it, you can go to my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Take you there right now. Nightlightastrology.com. Click on the courses page, click on the first year course page, scroll down to learn all about it. In this class, there are 30 courses that I lead. There are live webinars. If you can't attend live, all the recordings are kept for you and you have lifelong access to them. You can download them and keep them. There are also 12 guest lectures taught outside of class by guest teachers. We also have an interactive group forum discussion group that has tutors that are there and paid on my staff to support students in their work and studies throughout the year. You can contact me throughout the year anytime by email. I always answer student questions. We also have breakout study and tutoring sessions between major units. That's outside of the 30 classes and 12 guest teachers. So there's so much content. And there's recommended reading and listening and optional assignments and bonus lectures and videos and all sorts of stuff. It is a really good way to deepen the predictive element of your craft. Ancient astrology is, like I always say, it's like karmic analytics. You're learning how to understand what the most likely probabilities and patterns are in different areas of a person's life according to the birth chart. But in this class, we also pair that with archetypal and psychological dimensions of the reading that can make for a really good, well-rounded experience. We always want to honor the mix between the fatedness of our lives and the way in which our free will is always interacting and sort of creating our own experience. So we look at the intersection between those two things in this course always. You have a few payment options. The early bird payment will save you $500 off the course. That's a great way to go to save. You have a 12-month payment plan if you need it. And then if for any reason you can't afford the course, please take advantage of the need-based tuition. We like to make sure nobody's priced out of the program. So, if you're a single parent, a part-time job, you're a student, you're retired and on a fixed income, or whatever your situation might be that makes the price point inaccessible for you, not just I'm seeking a deal. We always trust people to determine that for themselves, but you can apply for need-based tuition. We'll take a look at your situation and, you can then choose a range that is really going to work for you for your monthly payment plan that you sign up for. So, we try to make sure that there's never an obstacle financially for people saying, yeah, I want to study astrology, because if that's a calling, to me, spiritual knowledge shouldn't ever, price people out. So thank you guys for letting me promote the program. I will be promoting the program and telling you more about it and, answering questions about it now until the beginning of June. If, by the way, you are already enrolled in one of my programs, don't forget the year 2 program and my new horary class start June 11th and 12th. And those are that's a perfect way of deepening your existing studies. One of the great features of my programs is that we host a lot of live client readings. So as you're developing theoretical work, you're seeing me apply it with live people, real readings, not just chart demos, but real readings. And then, after the client leaves the classroom space, then we break that reading down and I show you exactly how I implemented the theory in the reading, and you can ask questions. And people love that part about the course probably the most. All right, well, before we dive into Mars and Pisces today, make sure that if you are watching this, you help me grow this channel by liking and subscribing, share your comments as we go along, and click the notification bell for updates once you subscribe. That'll let you know when I go live. Occasionally I do live streams. I've done a bunch of those this week, and it's been really fun to talk about Jupiter and Neptune in the sign of Pisces. Also, by the way, if for any reason you need a transcript of my talk, you prefer to read it or get that transcript, they're usually on my website on the blog page, nightlightastrology.com, within about 24 hours. Okay, so what are the highlights? Mars is in Pisces from April 14th to May 24th. I'm going to actually bring this up to the current moment here and just show you the transit. So let me share my screen. We'll put the real-time clock up. Here we go. So here's the real-time clock, and you can see here's Mars entering Pisces. This is actually set to Friday, April 15th. But ingresses on April 14th. That's Thursday today. And so you can see that Mars is joining the big lineup of planets in Pisces, including an exalted Venus, the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. It's not going to catch up to those planets before Jupiter leaves Pisces and before Venus leaves Pisces, because it is slower moving than Venus, and Jupiter's got a big head start. Mars will eventually catch Jupiter in the sign of Aries. And believe me, we will be talking a lot about that transit. And the reason that we'll be talking a lot about that transit is because Jupiter changing signs is always a pretty big deal. And then, at the same time, Mars ingressing into its own home sign and then catching Jupiter, that's fireworks. That's a really big, dynamic, action-oriented transit, and that is alongside of eclipses coming through at the end of April and the middle of May. So, the action of Jupiter-Neptune, a beautiful, big, kind of glowy transit, well, that's followed by eclipse season and then a Jupiter sign change, a Mars-Jupiter conjunction, a lot of really dynamic astrology ahead in the month of May as well. But Mars in the sign of Pisces, one other note is that we will see Mars in the sign of Pisces conjoining Neptune on May 18th. That's another significant transit we will visit this month. That'll come next week. That we'll see. Excuse me. Let me see. Did I mess that up? Did I say next week? Hold on. Let me get that straight. Yeah, so it's May 18th, not April 18th. I think I said April 18th. So May 18th, and then, whatever I said, it's May 18th. So we'll be looking at Mars's conjunction with Neptune on May 18th. That's another really big, significant Mars transit. And that one's happening 2 days after the lunar eclipse in Scorpio, a Mars-ruled sign. So lots to look for. All right, well, some things to say about Mars and Pisces. This is just kind of a broad overview that I thought would be useful for us today in prepping for this transit, which lasts over a month. It's like, roughly 40 days, I guess. One thing to note is that Mars leaves back-to-back Saturn-ruled signs and enters a Jupiter-ruled sign. I'm going to go back in time a little bit and give you guys just a sense of how long this has actually been going on. So we have had Mars in back-to-back Saturn-ruled signs since late January. So, we're talking about 2.5, almost going on 3 months worth of Mars being in Saturn-ruled signs. In addition to Saturn being in back-to-back Saturn-ruled signs and Jupiter being in back-to-back Saturn-ruled signs and Pluto being in a Saturn sign for God knows how long. It's nice it's really nice, like Jupiter-Neptune. It's really nice to feel a different kind of planetary energy in the air. It moves things. Saturn is not at all a bad planet. I'm not trying to say like, oh, I'm just here to hate on Saturn, but Saturn is long and slow and hard. It's like a long winter. And you get Mars out of those wintry signs and starting to break into the double-bodied water sign that comes on the cusp of spring, zodiacally speaking. Doesn't matter where you live. This is about the archetypal symbolism, right? You get it into that double-bodied sign of the fish, and it starts moving. It changes. So it's getting out of back-to-back Saturn-ruled signs and entering a Jupiter-ruled sign where this very benefic, sort of uplifting Jupiter-Neptune conjunction has taken place. That's good. You're also getting Mars out of Saturn sign with Saturn. We had a Mars-Saturn conjunction, very contractive, very serious, very heavy, very feeling the weight, feeling the grind of things. So I like this just in terms of, Mars already the god of action, the god of war. Sometimes our actions are combative and involve, conflict, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the, action is empowering and action is this beautiful dynamic part of life. So Mars can, be very supportive of getting things done and of finding the energy needed to make changes or to move something forward, to complete something. A little bit less when it's in a Saturn ruled sign do you see that process moving along quickly. It's more contractive, it's weighty, it's concentrated. Moves into a Jupiter ruled sign, suddenly you start to feel it's a little bit more like, oh, you get the light angelic feeling of uplifting, energizing, something's gestating, something's moving. There's a feeling of like something like the image of almost like a silver fish darting below the surface of the water and catching a glint of sunlight. And there's something magical about Mars in this fishy sign of Pisces. That place, by the way, that we'll talk about this in a second, that exalts Venus. It's a really different mood for Mars. And I just encourage you all to try and take note of it and see what you see. By the way, at any point, if you take note of something and want to share it, use the hashtag grabbed. Tell us your story. Ancient name for the planets is grahas or grabbers, or email us your story, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Love aggregating those stories. And I'd be curious to see what you experience as Mars ingresses into Pisces. Of course, look at the whole sign house of Pisces in your birth chart as well. So the next thing I wrote down is that Mars now serves the Jupiter-Neptune agenda because it's in Jupiter's sign. So it's like a house guest in Jupiter's sign. And in a sense, is inclined toward the domicile rulership of Jupiter and Venus, the exaltation rulership of Venus, domicile rulership of Jupiter. So Mars, you could say, is serving let's broaden it and say Venus, Jupiter, Neptune agenda. By serving it, we mean acting on behalf of it. Now, there's some downsides to that, but the one thing that's nice about this is you now have action-oriented, a strong quality in Mars coming in and saying, okay, this is the dream, this is the vision, it's subtle, it's uplifting, it's romantic, and now it's time to put the dream into tangible, solid action. Like, let's do something about it. I like this as giving a boost to whatever dreams and hopes and uplifting or redeeming qualities Jupiter and Neptune might have brought in. Now there's the motivation to act on it somehow. The other thing that I think is a little bit volatile is that the sun in Aries is about to square Pluto in Capricorn on April 18th. That transit we are going to be tracking. I will probably do a video on that one tomorrow, maybe on Monday as well. That's a transit that can get fanatical. For example, Sun is already moving into a square with Pluto, one manifestation of that, and I mean just one, not the manifestation of it. Please don't, confuse what I'm saying, was the horrible subway shooting in Brooklyn. This is one manifestation of the Sun in its exaltation square Pluto in Capricorn. There's a very dark sense of power wrapped up in that transit, potentially. It's one manifestation. There are others. But now you're getting that Sun-Pluto conjunction tightening and intensifying as Mars enters the sign of Jupiter and Neptune. And that means that it's possible that someone could get fanatical, or that fanaticism could be a theme, especially in the next week. So I would watch for Mars in Pisces, a Jupiter-ruled sign, with the strong moral conviction of its beliefs or self-righteousness or even martyrdom behind it, potentially acting out in very violent and explosive ways with a kind of domineering Sun-Pluto square in the air right now, okay? The third thing that comes to my mind is that Mars exalts Venus. This means that Mars is very much like the Knight of Cups in tarot. It's sort of chivalrous. You have a moody, romantic, sort of inspired. It could be a little bit like Don Quixote. I don't know if you guys know that story, but like tilting at windmills, a little bit of a, like a bravado that's not grounded in one's actual ability or skill, or, almost like someone who thinks that they're a lot greater than they are, almost to the point of looking sort of foolish. Okay, so Mars can go a little over the top. It can get a little operatic, like just a little bit. Mars can have its, its silly pants on a little bit, not really realizing, you're over the top romantic, buddy. That kind of thing. So Mars exalting Venus, though, means that Mars is driven by romance, beauty, love. This can be Shakespearean, like Romeo and Juliet come to my mind for Mars, in as does Saturn in the sign of Pisces, which we'll get next year. When the malefics go through Pisces, there's this mixture of the quality of war along with the like beautiful visionary Jupiter and the, exalted sort of exotic sensual artistic dimension of Venus that both reside in this sign of the fish. So Mars is going to exalt Venus as it expresses Jupiterian things, and that can be just a very vivid sort of chivalrous combination. I think also of like, when I was a kid, I used to play like a lot of RPG video games like Dragon Warrior and Zelda. Actually, still sort of my closet, like along with sports, I would say playing the occasional like Zelda. I played Zelda Breath of the Wild with my daughter, and just loved it. It was so much fun. So fantasy, high fantasy. And I remember as a kid, one of the things that's so vivid about the Lord of the Rings, this kind of thing, is that there's a sense of it being very epic and romantic. It's very colorful and very artistic, like the costumes and the clothing and the worlds. There's so much artistry, and then it can be kind of like people stabbing orcs with swords and stuff. So there's that interesting combination of Mars, adventure and even violence in a sign that's very artistic and uplifting. And I think one of my favorite books of all time are probably The Lord of the Rings. So I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. Okay, well, this is a little bit I was hinting at earlier with the upcoming Sun-Pluto square, but Mars-Neptune, especially, because remember, Mars is now co-present with Neptune and heading toward a conjunction with Neptune in Jupiter's sign. Mars-Neptune can be fanatical in this sign. Like it can be a little bit like whoever believes something so intensely that they would be willing to commit, I think, for example, the Rwandan genocide, something that I ended up writing a paper on in when I was in my philosophy, I did my philosophy undergrad, right? And so you had to write like a senior paper in an ethics class, and I wrote on the Rwandan genocide, and I wrote a paper on like human nature and what human nature is capable of, and whatever. And it was I learned a lot about that conflict back then. I don't remember so much of it now, but one of the things I said is that it's a dangerous thing to mix elements of primal instincts, libido, territorial qualities that are in nature, like they exist in the animal kingdom, but then to combine that with people who can rationalize killing other people because of ideology, belief in convictions in things. And that's a little bit like Mars in the sign of the fish. You have something that's a very instinctual, emotional sign that can tap into something a little bit zealous and primal in us. But we can rationalize it with the almost like the Jupiterian sense of righteousness that the sign sometimes carries. So fanaticism is probably the shadow side of this transit, as far as I can tell. Now, the plus side is to be visionary and mission driven. Mars is like Mars in Pisces. I always make the comparison to Joan of Arc. It has that kind of feeling to it. I've received a vision from on high, and I'm going to war, whether it's literal or metaphorical or whatever. This is interesting. Mars is going to be culminating in the bounds of the malefics. That would be the last degrees of any sign. Generally speaking, the bounds are basically what you're taking the 30 degrees of a sign, you're breaking them up into 5 parts, and there are a certain number of degrees for every part of the sign and a different planet that rules the degrees of those parts. When you get to the last parts of the sign, the last 2 bounds of the signs, maybe a total of, say, 6 degrees or 7 degrees or something like that, those bounds are always ruled by the malefics. Saturn and Mars. So when Mars goes through those very last degrees, which are also just generally thought of as intense degrees throughout the history of astrology, it will be culminating in the bounds of the malefics at the end of Pisces as the lunar eclipse in Scorpio, the moon in its fall, of course, in Scorpio, in a Mars ruled sign. It's a harsher, more intense, dynamic place. Now, transformational, cathartic, it moves things, but like it's a little bit more intense. That eclipse is, I would say, going to be a little bit more of a nuclear feeling behind it emotionally. And then you've got Mars culminating in another water sign. So it sees the eclipse by a trine, which is actually good. Like it might be very supportive of some kind of catharsis or shift that we're trying to make. But at the last degrees of the sign, I get a little bit sketched out about that. I get a little bit like, be careful of fanatical Mars getting really intense. We already said Mars could be a little fanatical, and Pisces getting really intense at the very end as the lunar eclipse comes through in Scorpio on May 16th. So we're going to keep our eye on that one for sure. Now, Mars will join Jupiter in Aries in May. That's something else to look forward to, and that comes like right after Mars changes signs. So we get to those last degrees, that eclipse happens, and then boom, it enters Aries, picks up dignity, changes into a fire sign, and it hits Jupiter in Aries right away by conjunction. Now, that's another seeding moment that's not totally different from the seeding moment of Jupiter-Neptune, but the contrast is really interesting. Jupiter-Neptune is like, the clouds breaking and the sun pouring through and, Ode to Joy playing. and Jupiter and Mars conjoining is a bit more like the beat of a war drum, as like, half naked Vikings come over a hill facing a legion of trolls or something. It just has like, it's way more about engaging with something in an intense way, but it's also a seeding moment. It starts something. It's not the full story. It's starting something. It has quite a shelf life. And we'll look at cycles around that too and try to get some better understanding of it. Number 7, Mars will be more process-oriented in a water sign. That's the interesting thing about feminine signs, earth and water in general. They tend to be more process, relational, gestational. So you think also about something that Mars is cooking, things that are developing and gestating. So watch for a bit of a moody. It's not like the Saturn ruled signs we've just gone through, where Mars is like kind of more methodical and a little bit more severe and just gear grinding. This is more process oriented, ebbs and flows and moments of real dynamism and then pulling back. It's a little bit like, almost like a Qigong or the martial arts come to mind with Mars and Pisces. A lot of great athletes who are very fluid and adaptable have Mars and Pisces as well. Anyway, maybe I could do something, just start geeking out about sports astrology. But number 8, themes of sacrifice will be pronounced. Remember that Mars was the martyr, and Mars represented in the 6th house a place of service and sacrifice, even soldiers in death and battle. So themes of sacrifice will be pronounced. The idea of the martyr, the saint, the savior, the one who will die for a cause, who will fall on the sword, who will die on the hill. Those themes are in it. Are they good or are they bad? You could see a martyr complex. You could see sacrifice as a virtue. It just totally depends. But one thing that's nice to note is that this is a good time for some kind of meaningful theme of sacrifice towards something bigger or higher. Mars Neptune, which will come through again on May 18th. We, not me. Mars, when it's co-present with Neptune, tends to drop the normal Mars identification with me, my, and I, my will, my way, my autonomy, my individuality, my strength, my sovereignties, the big like new age phrase. I'm just really in my sovereignty, like that, like not that. When Mars is in Pisces, it shifts from me to we. It tends to be more about the same kind of themes of empowerment and like something bigger or larger that one has care or concern for, but it tends to be more collective. It tends to be more about we rather than me, but it's the same kind of Marsy dynamic. So potential also for ideological conflicts between groups or for group identification or missions where one is feeling a part of, identified with some category rather than feeling like an individual. So categories, we all identify with different categories, like I'm an astrologer or I'm a white heterosexual male, or whatever the case might be. But this transit tends to be about those missions or actions or plot lines that are driven along by being part of something. And it can also bring up the tension between the individual and the group labels or identity categories that we identify with. And sometimes the tension between those things is a very meaningful part of the Mars and Pisces exploration. Finally, number 10, themes of weakness and strength. Mars Neptune, co-present for quite a long time, will bring up the feeling of, omnipotence, of fantasies of being like, godlike power and greatness. Mars can get super inflated, in other words. But you can also go in the complete opposite direction and see this feeling of impotency, weakness. I suspect, for example, the theme of something like, what's the phrase? Erectile dysfunction, ED, is that what it's called? That kind of thing will come up. I guarantee you, I'll hear at some point in the next month, I'll hear issues with male fertility or, problems staying aroused or something like that. There's this potential for issues around, am I strong or am I really weak? Am I pathetic or am I, a hero? The extreme between like hero and like weakling, those tensions get really strong and often take us for a ride. It's important for us not to get fooled by the polarizing that can come up with these kinds of themes. So mostly we do that by talking about these themes and staying aware of them and trying to learning how to hold the tension of different kinds of opposites. All right, well, that's what I've got for today, everyone. I just wanted to kind of, warm us up for Mars changing signs. And if you would like to learn more about any of my work, check out my readings and courses at nightlightastrology.com. Don't forget, transcripts of my talks can be found usually within about 24 hours. And I really appreciate you liking, subscribing, sharing your comments, all that good stuff. Click on the notification bell once you subscribe if you want to receive updates when I go live. And don't forget, my new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystics, starts June 5th. Check it out on my website. Email us if you have any questions whatsoever. You can always reach us at info@nightlightastrology.com. All right, that's what I've got for today, and we'll see you again tomorrow, everybody. Thanks.